Hydro, the water element of Genshin Impact. The element is all about utility and gives off a calm and controlled atmosphere. The areas related to Hydro are often visually stunning, like Sangonomiya Shrine, and the Hydro characters offer a great amount of utility by applying Hydro to the enemies so that other characters can proc some of the most useful reactions in the game, or Hydro is also the prominent element for healers and utility. And then there's Childe. Now let's talk about Childe's gameplay and why it's good. First off, the main point of his kit, which is his elemental skill. Childe's elemental skill makes him swap between a melee and a ranged stance where he pulls out two water daggers. The attacks inside of the melee stance are fast and quite satisfying, and the weapon changes into a pole arm in the middle of the combo, which upgrades Childe's arsenal to a grand total of 3 weapons. The range stance also has some usability, but the usage mostly comes down to using the ult for its shorter animation and its Riptide application. The range stance can also be used to snipe off enemies from towers when doing open world content, or if you really need to cover the downtime from Childe's E, but in general the melee stance is where you will be using Childe most. It is also very important to mention that when Childe swaps back to his range stance, he spins his bow in his hands, which really never gets old. And now to Childe's most satisfying mechanic, Riptide. Riptide applies a stack whenever you crit them inside of your melee stance, or whenever you shoot a charged shot at someone or ult them inside of your range stance. This Riptide stack can be consumed by hitting the enemy again. This doesn't have to be done by Childe, but can also be done by other party members, and it causes a water explosion around them. This gives him some form of massive AoE, and with this you can mow down enemy groups in an extremely short amount of time. This can also be paired together with something like Electro Charge to really give you that taser feel where you can just eliminate a giant group of enemies with AoE upon AoE. Now all these elements leave us with something unique. Childe is one of the only Hydro damage dealers, and he has a large amount of AoE and is quite fast. Because he is Hydro, he can be slotted in with quite a lot of teams, and having this versatility really adds to your Genshin Impact gameplay. That is why I think that if you pull Childe, you will open up a lot of new alleyways to experience Genshin Impact. And that is why I think his gameplay will positively surprise a lot of people. And now to talk about teams. I think teams are important to a character's gameplay because you won't be using the character for the entire time that you're playing. You will be constantly swapping out between characters, and if a character has to be paired with quite boring sidekicks, it often quickly negatively impacts your gameplay. And that is a point where Tartaglia shines a little bit. He can be easily slotted into a wide array of teams, and you can be quite creative with teams that you can slot him into. Now I want to talk about 3 teams in specific. The Taser team, a variant with the Taser team using Raiden Shogun and Ye Miko, and the last team having Zhang Ling to proc the Pyro reaction with Tartaglia's water. Now I do want to mention that you can slot in Kazuha in any of these teams, but because he wasn't blessed by the rerun Archon, I unfortunately do not have him. The first team, involving Beidou and either Raiden Shogun or Fischl, is kind of the fireworks team. You get a lot of water and electro reactions which chain between enemies and causes some sort of firework looking team. You can also slot in Sukuros or Kazuha within these teams to proc even more reactions for extra shine. I personally think this team is quite functional, and using Beidou is always an advantage as she can compensate for Tartaglia's downtime with using her counter. The second team, and my personal favorite, is using Miko and Raiden Shogun together to proc a lot of electro reactions with Tartaglia. This team is not particularly meta efficient, but it creates very interesting gameplay with swapping ults between Miko and Raiden Shogun, and it really makes up for Tartaglia's downtime. And the last and probably the hardest hitting team, the Xiangling comp. Xiangling, who constantly procs Pyro from a Pyronado, is the best mix for Childe because he can constantly proc Hydro on the enemy, and then Xiangling can vape the Hydro, and it causes for her to be able to deal like 30k to almost 50 to 60k if you have a really well built on that Pyronado. You can absolutely melt enemies in Abyss with this. I do usually pick Zhongli and Bennett with this team to ensure that none of the units in it die. Zhongli's ultimate is also very useful to make sure that your combo hits the enemies as they are frozen for a short period of time, and Bennett's damage increase can really not be matched by any other unit. Now let's talk about Tartaglia's aesthetic. His aesthetic can be simplified down to one sentence. He's a Fatui Harbinger. He's wearing a Harbinger outfit. You can clearly see that he works with the Fatui by his Fatui mask that he wears on the side of his head, and also his Fatui outfit, which gives him an appearance that he is from Snezhnaya. His outfit does have a couple of unique features, one being his cape or his robe at his left shoulder, which changes color and starts to wave with water when you press your elemental skill on your E. Childe's Hydro Vision can be found on the bottom of his jacket, where he has left it unbuttoned and you can see it attached to his belt. And last, let's talk about his weapon, the Polestar. I think the Polestar fits Tartaglia quite well, as it clearly emphasizes that he has a Hydro Vision, but it can also be interchanged with the Rust, which also very nicely fits Tartaglia's color scheme on his outfit of grey and red. And now a short summary of Childe's lore. In short, the current Childe simply loves to kill things. Childe didn't used to be this way, as when he was a little kid, he used to be afraid of monsters. But he got in contact with the Abyss, and since then his personality has changed, and he has obtained additional powers, where he's become more savage and lusting for combat. Childe was trained by an unknown character called Skirk, who Childe describes as his master. Skirk taught Childe how to fight while he was within the Abyss, and we don't know much about Skirk apart from the fact that she also lives and resides within the Abyss. The current version of Childe is a bloodthirsty warrior who will take up any combat challenge with pleasure. Childe constantly seeks ways to become stronger and takes pleasure in battling strong opponents. These ideals make Childe an excellent Fatui Harbinger, but also a bit of an outlier, as most Fatui Harbingers prefer to scheme behind the scenes, while Childe enjoys being front and center. Childe is currently loyal to the Tsarissa and the Fatui, but after the events of Liu Wei is also friendly with the Traveler. Childe also cares deeply about his family, which we got a small look at during his story quest with Tooser, where he lies about being an absolute murder machine and covers it up by telling Tooser that he is a overseas toy seller. Currently, Childe's lore can simply be summed up as Murder Man loves to kill many things. But within the future releases of new content within Genshin Impact, we will get to see a lot more about Childe and the Fatui, as he was described as a walking spoiler by the developments during an interview conducted at the 1.1 patch. In conclusion, I think Tartaglia is one of the most fun heroes in Genshin Impact, and he often gets completely butchered for his low individual damage, while he can easily make up for it with having great team synergy and in general just being an interesting character. A Fatui Harbinger and having such big involvement in the story is also a big plus. I do hope that after this video you might want to consider once again to pull Childe in his inevitable rerun on every upcoming patch.